So first, some housekeeping. Down in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, you will see a chat room box. You can type in a question or comment at any time. Everybody in the group will see it. So that's one way we can communicate. Another way is the Q&A, question and answer mode, is active on this webinar. So you'll see a ask a question button. It's just like in school. You click on the ask a question button and it raises your hand from what I can see and puts you in the queue to ask a question. We'll keep it relatively informal. And then during the course of this webinar tonight, we're going to try a series of polls to get your thoughts, to have you participate in the discussion and the discourse here tonight, because we have a couple of very, very timely and relevant topics. And I'm sure by the time we're done tonight, you're going to be able to connect what happened with the state Supreme Court and the John Doe investigation with what is going on with the Walker presidential campaign. Because that is our primary topic of discussion tonight, is the Walker campaign kickoff and establishing his vision, his moral vision, through values expressed in the campaign launch. Then we're going to follow that with kind of a brief discussion on the whole idea of hierarchy. When we talk about framing, we talk a lot about values and language and messaging, but we don't spend a lot of time talking about the fact that the conservative frame largely depends on a hierarchy: economic hierarchy, social hierarchy, gender hierarchy, race hierarchy. And we're going to take a look at that. And there's a great book that was written just a couple of years ago that I actually found at the Madison Public Library. And there's some great points from a political scientist that really disclose the function of hierarchy in how the conservatives have succeeded in building up their dominance in presenting their vision to the world. And there are ways we can counter that. So by the time we're done tonight, you'll have a good idea of what Walker is saying, how to effectively change people's minds from thinking in terms of hierarchies to a more progressive vision. And then you'll have some participation in the polls that are going to happen during the presentation. And of course, if you have any questions, please just click on the Ask a Question button, type something in the chat room, and away we go. So Scott Walker is bid for the GOP presidential nomination, and I'm sure you've noticed he just keeps on getting press, much more so than any other candidate who's launched. His campaign has just picked up traction all over the place, and I'm sure most of you follow Facebook, Twitter, social media. You see him everywhere, even in progressive pages and by progressive commentators. And there's a reason for that. So the first thing, excuse me, that a campaign does when it releases a video or it releases its first statement is that it establishes the frame. I should say an effective campaign does this. Not all campaigns do this, but effective campaigns and successful campaigns do this. And it establishes their frame. So to use Scott Walker as the example, what he did in his first campaign video, which we'll watch in a second here, it's just about a minute and a half long, it evokes and reinforces conservative values. That's the number one thing that it wants to do. And that gives him a consistent message that fits who he is as a candidate. So there's a couple things that are really important. First of all is the candidate has to be authentic. The candidate has to be the physical embodiment of that frame, which Scott Walker clearly is. just as Elizabeth Warren is a great embodiment of the progressive frame. So that consistent message fits him physically. The two go hand in hand. The other thing that it's going to do, and you're actually seeing this, once you come away from this webinar tonight, go back to your social media pages and look at what's being said in the press and social media, and it's reinforcing what he does. It's using that language, and people are using that same language when they try to attack Walker. But we know that that just reinforces, and that is going to attract biconceptual progressives to the moral leadership that he represents in the conservative frame. And even though you're going to have the 15 or 20% of really hardcore progressives who have a physical aversion to Scott Walker, saying, no, he's terrible, it's that middle critical 40 to 50% that are biconceptually progressive that are going to be attracted by his moral message and his leadership. And what does that look like? Here is the video, and here we go.
On a cold, windswept day, Scott Walker solemnly took the oath of office. His state faced a staggering deficit. Unemployment lines were long, so he took big, bold action. The left erupted. They stormed the Capitol, but Scott Walker stood his ground, unintimidated. They even threatened his family, but he stood firm, and he won. The battle left the big government special interests crippled, but the real winners, children, taxpayers, seniors.
He told people who he was, what he believed, what he was going to do, and he got elected, then he did it. And his reforms are working.
Unable to make him cave, the left tried to recall him. They threw everything at him, and he beat them again.
Scott Walker remains Wisconsin's governor.
Scott Walker routed the recall. It wasn't even close.
Why'd he win?
He balanced the budget, he lowered taxes, he's turning our economy around, reforming our schools. Courage is on the ballot. What the left is trying to do is send a signal to any other reformer like Scott Walker, don't dare try this because we'll get you next.
And the left couldn't believe it.
To say that I'm shocked and stunned is pretty much an understatement.
We all thought it was going to be a long night. I had chocolate for dinner. Maybe the recall of Governor Scott Walker would actually be decided in a matter of 49 minutes. This election tonight may have just been one recall election for one governor's seat.
What happens as a result of this could be the biggest politics story of all.
Thank you. There you go. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, I forgot to click my microphone back on after the audio there. So you should have the poll up, and people are voting already. So the question is, in this video here, in the conservative frame, what's the most impactful concept? If you're a conservative and you you're listening to this, or even a progressive, think non-political, think non-partisan. What is the most impactful? And we're getting close here to okay. So it looks like everybody has voted, and we're gonna end voting. There we go. So I want to congratulate you all. Excellent job. The majority of people got it right. Some people chose the lowered taxes. That's close. That is obviously strong conservative value. But the answer is that he fought the unions and won. So let's get back to, there we go. So it's right. He fought the unions and won. Here's why. Here's the key language to look for, because if you know the key language that evokes those conservative values, you know what to avoid. And you need to look for areas to avoid and recognize what conservative framing is saying about Scott Walker and what he's evoking, and pivot that. So we're going to look at that. So the first two sections that are key are Scott Walker solemnly took the oath of office, and then he took big, bold action. So what that does is it sets him out as being, it presents him physically as being moral and spiritual, that solemn, taking it seriously, that he'll act on his moral certitude, being a leader, willing to take big, bold action, right? And we know from a lot of research, people look for moral leadership. So that's powerful. Next. I'm sure this caught your attention. And you probably had some kind of just cringing when you heard this, that the left erupted, they stormed the Capitol, but Scott Walker's the ground. And they threatened his family, but he stood firm and he won. All right, so there you get this idea of the left erupting and storming the Capitol. And I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday about this, and I would suggest that even if people hadn't gone into the Capitol and occupied the Capitol, they had just protested around it, they would have still used the same language, storm the Capitol. So what are those phrases saying? They're saying that his opponents, in this case, public sector unions, teachers, pretty much anybody with a progressive point of view, they're undisciplined and immoral, and they deserve punishment. And what's especially important about this whole winning thing is that this is a moral victory. Just think about that in terms of how they phrase that, storming the Capitol, threatening his family, that these people are immoral and undisciplined. Therefore, from the authority figure, him, they deserve punishment. So his is a moral victory. Really powerful stuff. Next, along this same line of the moral victory, the battle. Right? You have a battle. Good versus evil is how battles are qualified. So the winner is the person who's moral, and the loser deserves to lose because they're immoral. Very, very powerful stuff here. So left the special interest crippled because they deserve to be beaten. The winners were the taxpayers, and then he beat them again. So you're going to probably anticipate where this is going, is that what this statement does is it affirms the moral rightness of his victory. I'm just going to pop back to that previous slide, right? So here's a battle, leaving the special interest crippled with the taxpayers being the winners. That's a morally right victory because of the immorality of his opponents. They deserve to be defeated. So what this is doing is it's positioning Walker as the moral leader for the conservatives, which, I've said before, George Wittkopf has said before, others have said it, but the fact that this initial video presents it so strongly in terms of values in the conservative frame is a really great lesson. So before we get to this slide, I have another quick poll here. I'm guessing that this one's going to probably be, so in your mind, after hearing that video and seeing the breakdown of it, can you think of any Democratic leader expressing such a strong moral message? And go ahead and vote on that. If you say yes, maybe just in the chat section, if you want to just type in, if people are so inclined, who you think that is. Because I'm seeing there are some people that are saying yes. So I can probably guess who you would say. Let's see what people come up with here. But everybody's voted, and we have a split decision, which is great. So who would you consider to be a Democratic leader? So Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is an interesting case. Yes, Elizabeth Warren for sure. Absolutely, yes. Elizabeth Warren is one of the few. Bernie Sanders is an interesting case. So we had a split decision. What was that survey there? We'll get back to, oops, wrong one. This one, here we go. Bernie is very factual. And I wrote about this a little bit in the last newsletter, the Feel the Burn article. This idea that he's very factual. He's always on the progressive side of facts. But he is kind of the embodiment of the physical idea. And yeah, Anne made a great observation. Elizabeth Warren not in the moral message as Walker. I would agree, not consistently in the moral message. But you know, Bernie kind of physically embodies progressive ideas. When you see him, you inherently, unconsciously know what he's talking about. And the question I raised was, you know, maybe that's enough. You know, maybe just people understanding that unconsciously isn't enough to carry him the distance. The question that I was asking was, is it enough to attract biconceptuals? You know, certainly it will rally progressives and biconceptuals who are strongly progressive and only slightly conservative. So that's great observations. We will have to see how that plays out. So that was his first video, was the Recall the Recall, was the title of that. The next one, so this is the official campaign launch video. I'm going to mute myself and hopefully remember to unmute myself when we're done. But so here we go.
For too long, they've said we have to compromise our principles to win. Scott Walker showed the path to victory is to run on our principles. Conservative, bold, decisive. He balanced budgets, cut taxes, beat the special interests, improved education, created jobs, and showed how to fight and win.
America needs new, fresh leadership with big, bold ideas from outside of Washington. Actually get things done. Wisconsin, we didn't nibble around the edges. We enacted big, bold reforms, took power out of the hands of the big government special interests, gave it to the hardworking taxpayer. People's lives are better because of it. We fought and we won. In the Republican field, there are some who are good fighters. They haven't won those battles. There are others who've won elections but haven't consistently taken on the big fights. You showed you can do both. Now I'm running for president to fight and win for the American people. Without sacrificing our principles, we won 3 elections in 4 years in a blue state. We did it by leading. Now we need to do the same thing for America. It's not too late. We can make our country great again. Join our cause. Help us fight and win for America.
Your hearts are probably all really, really palpitating now, because that, you know, what's interesting is you've seen a lot of fact checking going on. I've noticed people have taken his logo and kind of made fun of it, or they're questioning its legitimacy. But here's the next question that I want to ask. And so from that video, go ahead and start voting anytime. Which idea in this video is the most impact? Kind of a trick question, and I'm guessing you all get it, right? So, and yes, you've all got it instantaneously. Fantastic. Right, showed how to fight and win. What's really interesting is, again, look at what is being said by the opposition party in terms of what is important about it, right? Fact checking, did he cut taxes? Or, what are the effects of him cutting taxes, right? Cuts to education, cuts to social services, cuts to, environmental protection, things like that. The whole jobs issue. He invested in education line is getting a lot of attention. And, I almost think that's intentional. It's almost like they're baiting progressives to say, yeah, attack us on these issues. We want you to attack on these issues because we're going to keep saying that, he knows how to fight and win. Really interesting. So thanks. Good on everybody for that. So you're going to see a consistency now, because again, the consistency reinforces it. It gives Walker that physical embodiment, right? They start out by saying they said we would have to compromise our principles to win, right? And who's the they? I would argue he's talking about the Washington establishment, Republicans and Democrats, because he's saying that he doesn't have to compromise when Republicans in Washington do that all the time. Now, we can argue about whether that's actually true or not, but it is really, really important for how he's framing himself. Okay? He showed the path to victory is to run on principles, conservative, and fight and win. So there's the equivalency there of uncompromising means winning. Right? Remember Barry Goldwater? That compromise is evil. So this really sets the foundation for Walker's strength. Discipline and moral rightness. The victories have been morally just against the immoral opponents, because of course Slick is immoral. And this sets him as the example as a moral leader. Okay, the next key lines, going back to the idea of big, bold reforms, and here is the money statement right here. Taking power out of big government special interest, that is public, and gave it back to taxpayers representing the private. So there's kind of the money statement in the conservative frame, and that he will fight and win for the American people. So the bottom line in the Walker campaign videos here, and you're going to hear him say it all over and over again. So fight and win are critical. Why are fight and win? Because in the conservative frame, the winners are disciplined. If you aren't winning, if you're not succeeding, you're not disciplined. Therefore, you're not moral. So his is a moral and just victory. So very powerfully, here he is as not just the authority figure, but a moral leader with the authority to act on that. And that is going to be presented a little bit later in the whole hierarchy conversation. So something that I want to really underscore, and this is a conversation that I've been having with folks in the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, and some other people online, is that if you reference these 5 critical phrases or words, because we all know that words are understood in the context of a frame, and by evoking those words evokes the entire frame, right? Standing with. Battle, we talked about. Fighting, winning, any aspect of that in the context of the campaign. And special interests will evoke and reinforce this powerful frame that Walker has kind of constructed. So why special interests? Because special interests are understood in common sense to be the public sector unions. That's how conservatives have established that phrase in their frame, and it's very consistent, in terms of being understood as common sense. So there are your phrases to avoid. So let's take a look at what progressives are saying, and I have to thank State Rep Melissa Sargent, who actually just yesterday forwarded me these images that are being handed down by some of the best and brightest in the progressive world. People for the progressives for the American way, and then Hillary Clinton's kind of fact check organization, because obviously they're working on the whole Walker fact check thing. So you're going to find these really interesting. So this is People for the American Way. Sorry, not progressives. People for the American Way. But a progressive organization, advocacy group. So I found this interesting on a couple fronts. And for those of you who have been in education, the first thing that I noticed is that governor is spelled wrong. I don't know if that's intentional, to try to do some kind of a delegitimizing of his office or his position, but I found that really disturbing, especially since it's kind of the headline, Governor Scott Walker, because conservatives will be enraged by that. They'll just think that People for the American Way have no idea what they're doing, while at the same time reinforcing him because there's his name and his position in big letters, and there's a relatively kind of authoritative looking picture of him. And then this idea that equal pay, called equal pay a bogus issue, right? So here we are, in a moral campaign focusing on an issue. And not only an issue, a critical issue, but an issue that is defined for one specific group, women. And of course, in the conservative frame, we're going to look at the hierarchy later. You know that women are below men in the conservative hierarchy. Therefore, they don't deserve equal pay. And when they become more moral and disciplined, you know the rest. They will have their equal pay. So, terrible. So this is from CTR, Correct the Record. You can see the logo up in the upper left-hand corner there. So this is, they came up with all these issue responses on social media. And I picked a couple of the highlights here. So you have blocking equal pay. So here we are with the equal pay thing again, right? But look at the text. Make it harder for victims of wage discrimination to do what? To fight. So here they are, evoking the whole idea of a fight. Well, first of all, again, let's think in the conservative frame. You're talking about women not getting equal pay, and a fight against Scott Walker. Scott Walker will prevail because he's the moral leader. And again, you have a relatively decent looking picture of him, larger than anything else, with Scott Walker underneath it. So, next one. Again, this is Correct the Record. This reminded me of something that ran during the recall, right? Scott Walker. So not only do they say Scott Walker up top, they say Scott Walker's leadership, and they say private sector job growth, and this whole idea of can't afford what Scott Walker has done to Wisconsin. Look, this is just negation. They're trying to say, don't think of Scott Walker as a leader. Don't think of him as a moral leader. Right? Think of him as, they don't say what to think of him, but they're saying don't think of him this way. Well, the banner headline is Scott Walker leadership. And of course, the whole focus on private sector job growth, immediately that reinforces the entire economic conservative economic thing. This one's really interesting, and because you see this whole idea of the Koch brothers controlling Scott Walker being a bad thing, but the first thing in terms of imagery, again, here's a picture of Walker, again reinforcing the physical embodiment of the conservative frame, but you have make Scott Walker president. They're saying not president, but again, negation, what does that do? It plants the unconscious frame in your mind, Scott Walker president. And the idea that billionaires are supporting Scott Walker, that's not something to undermine him with. Why? Because what are billionaires? I hope you're saying they're disciplined in their moral frame, in the moral conservative frame, right? They're disciplined. They deserve all that money. They deserve to be powerful. Just a couple more. This one really stuck out at me. This whole idea that he's denying science, right? But yet it says that he's a key figure in the GOP's fight against rules to reduce America's carbon footprint, right? Anybody who has an ounce of conservative biconceptualism in them is going to love that ad, that image, because it's saying that he is a moral leader for something that we believe in. We don't believe government should have a role in regulating what corporations do, because they're the job creators, right? So again, not only is it negation, but it's also just completely reinforcing what conservatives believe. And then, of course, the whole image thing. So, last one. So Republican governors like Scott Walker have made their names stomping on workers' rights. And then the little quote from Hillary saying she will fight back. Well, okay. So on a number of levels. First of all, yes, Scott Walker is very proud of the fact that he has stomped on workers' rights. Right? He's fought and won that battle. That's, and again, there's a wonderful picture of him looking very, very presidential. Interesting. The quote from Hillary does nothing because she's evoking this whole idea of fighting back. Well, look, if you're not the moral person in the battle, the moral entity in the battle, you can fight back all you want, but you deserve to lose. It also doesn't help, no offense to the women, but it doesn't help in terms of the conservative frame that she's a woman. So I'm going to open up another poll here. Maybe. So I just want to see what you think, and I'd be interested if any of you feel that they do have some type of moral counter, because maybe I missed it. Maybe I'm so inclined to to look for things that don't reinforce it. But the voting is coming in quickly, and yeah, it's looking like people think not so much, right? So that's a problem. And what's interesting is that these images are being they're going viral because it's the first thing out of these progressive leadership PACs. So I think very much in terms of us in Wisconsin, it's going to be critical for us. And yes, it was unanimous, actually. All the votes are in. Nobody thought that they had a moral counter. It's really going to be a lot of us, creating the the buzz, the undercurrent of what's effective in undermining it. And we're going to look at that right now. So what should we talk about? Well, you've all seen enough about the progressive frame to kind of get the basics. But I want to just underscore 3 key aspects that I think we really need to focus on moving ahead to 2016. So there's 3, think of it as a, quite a metaphor, of the 3-legged stool of the progressive frame. Take one away, the stool falls down. And it's really true. First of all, we all know that prosperity in private life relies systemically on the public. I put systemically in there because it's important that we start communicating the fact that we're all interlinked, that government, the private sector, all of us in the world are systemically connected. And our prosperity now and in the future relies on that system functioning. Second leg is the public is people acting to expand everyone's freedom to pursue meaningful life. Right? This is what democracy is. Democracy is all of us being empathetic, electing representatives who share our values, who will act to expand freedom for everyone to pursue a meaningful life. Not just the privileged and the wealthy. That's important. So number 3 is kind of the end responsibility of the public in the progressive frame is that it protects and empowers the people it serves. Now, that's really important because it gives the public a moral role, a moral responsibility. Whereas in the private sector, the form of governance in the private sector is a corporation, but corporation is also a form of governance, and the moral role of a corporation is to make profit. Right? So if you don't have the public protecting and empowering the people, you kind of have what we have now. So in terms of, think of that 3-legged stool. As I pull the next one up here, let's see, here we go. So think about this. With Scott Walker as governor, think of that 3-legged stool, because we're in the progressive frame now. Mark which one of those you think that he's done. Has he increased prosperity for everyone through the public? Has he acted on empathy to provide freedom to everyone? Has he protected and empowered everyone through the public? The votes are coming in. Gives me a chance to get a drink of water here. So the votes are all in, and guess what? It's unanimous. And I completely set you up for that question. But, you know, I want you to think of it in terms of that because it's important for what's next. So think of Walker in terms of his actions, what he's done, and how that fits into the conservative, or the progressive frame, progressive frame. He's betrayed trust. He hasn't done any of those things in the 3-legged stool. In fact, he has no legs. There's no legs to his stool. He is on the ground because he's betrayed our trust. Right? He's hurt communities like yours. He's hurt people like you. He doesn't care about people like you, right? Tammy Baldwin used this against Tommy Thompson. It was really effective. He doesn't, he's not for you anymore. He's put his national political desires over people like you. So I would ask, first of all, this is kind of a question you can answer yourself. If you think of anybody or an example of that, please put it in the chat box. But is there anybody saying this? I mean, I've been following press releases all week after Walker's announcement. I haven't seen anybody talking about this, talking about facts, talking about cuts to education, but he's not talking about how he's, morally hurt communities like ours, hurt people like us, not caring about others. So we have that betrayal of trust. Okay, that's the undermining frame. So we need to start talking about, the Dems are kind of getting better at talking about shared values. You're kind of seeing people are talking about shared values. They're not really communicating the values yet, but they're kind of getting there, and I'm working on that. So they've betrayed some really core values. Empathy, clearly. The conservatives have betrayed empathy. Freedom, right? Freedom for everyone. Expanding freedom for everyone through empathy. Opportunity, responsibility. This is a big one. Community, right? They have betrayed community because what are they doing? They're dividing communities. Very important, right? So the next question here that you see in the kind of the vote from the slide there. I want to get an idea, because we've actually got people on from actually all over the state. We've got kind of all corners of the, wow, people are answering already. Okay. Yeah. So which issue has he betrayed the trust in your community on? And think in terms of what people talk about in your community the most. Interesting. Oh, we're getting, yeah, kind of. Oh, and somebody's putting in an other, so I'll ask whoever typed in the other to put in the chat room down there. Oh, Anne is typing, good. So everybody can see what you're talking about. So I'll tell you, everybody's voted, and the majority said education. Oh, Anne said local control. Oh, anything else on that? It looked like you were typing more, but okay, local control. Local control is, open records. Yeah, open records, yes. Okay, open records. I would say open government, not necessarily, I mean, transparent government kind of evokes the accountability frame for conservatives. But yes, open government, certainly, yes. Open government. And I would put, instead of saying local control, I would say local democracy and open government. The whole control thing is tricky. You've got to provide good progressive context for control. Otherwise, you start evoking this idea of the authoritarian has the moral, kind of the moral right to control, to dictate what goes on because they have the moral authority. So you get into that kind of thing. But yes, local democracy and local government, absolutely. But the majority did say education. But actually there was, so we had the vote for the economy, we had votes for education, we had vote for healthcare, vote for women's freedom, and yes, you're welcome. Yes, local democracy and open government. Yes, perfect. And the environment. So clearly, right, the point of this is that even though education is on everybody's mind, clearly, it's a key issue. It's all over the board, right? So the point is, progressives, we have lots of opportunities to undermine his frame, right? All we have to do is think in terms of the three-legged stool, right? What's missing, which is everything, right? And then the values on each issue. So, for example, education. People, especially in rural areas that I've heard of, really share the values of community and opportunity and the fact that we have responsibility for the future generations, which is what we do through education, public education, right? And then, so, excuse me, establish that frame, right? That he's betrayed the public trust by his actions, right? He's hurt communities, he's hurt people, he's hurt children's opportunity for the future. He's betrayed our responsibility to future generations through public education, right? That kind of thing. That undermines the conservative frame. Then it provides you with the basis for your facts, right? How much money is being stolen from public education to be put into taxpayer subsidized private schools? Right? You get the idea. This will work on every issue. For example, one of our subscribers, which I'll put it in the next Thinking Points journal is coming out next Tuesday. I'm going to put kind of the final stuff in there from the rural caucus and messaging for county fairs, in the summer. This idea that government should stay out of a woman's decision for her health care, right? And it's understandable that people would think that way because it makes common sense. But really, when you say that, you're evoking the conservative frame, right? Less government. Government is intrusive. What we want to say in terms of women's freedom is that, go back to the, I'll click it back for you so you can see it real quick here. So point number 3, the final layer is the public protects and empowers the people it serves. Think of that in terms of women's freedom, right? The public, government, as represents us, the people, right? It has a moral responsibility to protect a woman's freedom to control her own body or make decisions about her body. That's the message, right? Because that completely changes the frame and then shows how Scott Walker has betrayed the public trust, right? He's betrayed the public trust because he's not doing that. On the contrary, he's letting men have dominance over women's lives and women's bodies. Big difference there. So there you go. So that kind of structure, right? So the betrayal of trust, the values that he has betrayed, or conservatives, GOP in general, especially about what's happening with the budget, right? The values on issues people care about that they betrayed, right? And the facts, right? So there is a three-legged stool of a structure to support the three-legged stool of progressive framing and messaging. So there we go. Just take a moment if you've got some questions about that. If you want to ask about a specific issue, maybe we'll take a moment because I'm going to pull up the next slideshow. We'll move on to hierarchy, which will relate strongly to this, and I think it'll really blow your mind. So okay, I'm going to close. I'll walk it there. Okay. Okay. Part 2. So it occurred to me in not only reading George and listening, re-listening to some of his lectures recently, because I always have to go back to the well, and then reading other cognitive science, political science stuff, and it really struck me that we don't talk enough about hierarchy. And the conservative frame is built on a hierarchy of all different types. Every possible, economic, social, racial, gender. And it's powerful. It's really common sense. It's really structured in our DNA. And we often overlook how powerful hierarchy is, and I don't think we recognize it enough as people who are looking to change public discourse and being, kind of trailblazers in our communities. So I just did a little, it is somewhat a pyramid there, of this whole foundation of authority. Because the foundation of authority in the conservative frame derives from this structural hierarchy that exists everywhere in the frame, right? And it starts out, number one, with God. And this is critical to how people perceive conservative messaging, conservative values, and everything. So, right, you have God at the top, right? And then you have man and wealth and the market. Okay? Each one of those is moral, and each one is just below God in the hierarchy. Okay? Then the next subset of the hierarchy is the United States, both as a nation and a people, and a society, culture, capitalism, Christians, and white people. Okay? So then, getting lower in the hierarchy, you have nature, women, and children. Right? You see, God has dominion over man. Man has dominion over nature, women, children. Okay, and then below that is other nations, non-Christians, non-whites, and poor people. Right? So you see the hierarchy can play out, across different subsets. Wealth, the wealthy over the poor. The market is functionally more moral than the U.S., which makes sense. It makes sense as to why the focus on the market and the free market economy in the conservative world. So, kind of an outline there. And if you want this, just shoot me an email. This will get up tomorrow in the archive, so you can always reference it back. But if you want it by email, just let me know. So this, as I said, this is in our DNA. This goes way back. I mean, here's a great illustration of the Mayan social pyramid, right? And think in terms of, let's go back to, the conservative hierarchy, and then the Mayan class society, the king or high priest. Think of that in terms of God. God is represented on earth. Then you have the council of nobles, which would correspond to men, white Christian males, the wealthy, definitely the wealthy in terms of the market. And then you have the subset of merchants, artisans, commoners, farmers, slaves, things like that. So hierarchy is in our DNA. And, the problem is that in especially in terms of conservative politics, the hierarchy is so dominant that there's nothing to counter it. There's no effective language, and so we need to start building that. So it has a really strong unconscious influence on us, and we know that the unconscious is, far and away stronger than what we consciously understand. And I think that if we're honest with ourselves, we will find that this has influenced all of us, right? Conservatism, in terms of the hierarchy, right? And it, as a political system, it's attractive to the middle class, right? The wealthy, the powerful, are attracted to conservatism because it puts them at the top of the hierarchy, right? It's mostly attracted to the majority race, right? Because whites over non-whites. This is something I want you to consider because this is going to go to the next slide. But then this hierarchy in conservatism, right, is both counter-revolutionary and it's always new, right? So think of the Tea Party, okay? The Tea Party was a counter-revolution against the pending revolution of the 99%. Okay, think of it that way. So you the 99% kind of revolution going on, economic justice, social justice, that kind of thing happening recently. So the Tea Party is kind of the counter-revolutionary to that, right? Fed by the ruling class, the majority race. but it's new, right? Because they completely changed how people think of conservatism, in contemporary times. And then, of course, there's this idea of obedience to higher authority, which conservatism depends on. So this is the book that I've been reading, and if any of you are interested in some really cool contemporary political science writing, this is a great book, The Reactionary Mind, subtitled Conservatism from Edmund Burke to Sarah Palin. So the central idea of the book is that what conservatism functions as in politics is to defend, those in power or privilege against movements demanding freedom and equality, right? Which is exactly this idea, counter-revolutionary and new, and then of course based on the whole hierarchy, that it has to be based on authority. So what this book here, The Reactionary Mind, what Corey Robbins says, and is actually critical to the conservative frame as we think, as we're processing it as framers and trailblazers here. He's saying that there's this unconscious acceptance of these hierarchical principles, right? And people do this unconsciously for the following reasons, right? Because people feel the need for protection and survival, right? Well, like 9/11, and all the terrorist, the anti-terror scare tactics, homeland security, things like that, right? This need for protection and survival reinforces it, right? It provides leadership, right? People are always looking, from the time we're born, we're looking to mom and dad for leadership. We're always looking for leadership, right? So that unconscious acceptance of the hierarchy provides protection and leadership. The other thing that happens unconsciously is that, and I think this is true of Scott Walker, and why he is such an attractive authority for people is that they see themselves in him. This goes along with conservative populism, and I think this is such a cool connection, right? That people identify with the authority figure, and to that point, consider in the book the French philosopher Joseph Lemaistre, who was a pro-monarchy French philosopher during the French Revolution, right? Who traveled between England and France to get away from different revolutions happening because he was pro-monarchy, right? But he was a counter-Enlightenment philosopher. But what he said was, and conservatives, contemporary conservatives like Paul Ryan, Scott Walker, John Boehner, go right down the line, right? This is what they believe, right? That authority is necessary. Right? Lemaistre said the monarchy is necessary. But what overall the hierarchy says is that authority is necessary. And that the foundation for that authority is legitimate because it's in society. Right? Basically, the good people are born wealthy and they'll have the power, and the bad people are poor and they deserve to be told what to do because they couldn't figure it out for themselves. Counter-Enlightenment, right? So this hierarchy also says it's necessary for decisive action and it's necessary for national leadership. Right? So going back to Scott Walker as the leader, this is consistent with that, and it makes it even more powerful because genetically we are all predispositioned to understand and accept hierarchies. So one of the things that Lemaistre wrote that I thought was, I want to now connect this towards the end of this presentation. I want to connect this with Scott Walker, right? And how he has this kind of, regular person, I'm just one of you image that he's kind of living out, right? that in order to be accepted, right, the authority figure, what Maestro said going back to the French Revolution was, so for the monarchy to be accepted, so for the authority figure, conservative to be accepted, right, it's the foundation of conservative populism. People have to identify with the authority figure. Why did Mitt Romney lose? Nobody identified with him. Right? They have to suffer in the hard school of adversity. That's a quote. Right? Scott Walker's always getting beat up. He's always being attacked. From the time he was county executive, he's been attacked. Right? He dropped out of college. Right? To go live life, to experience life, to he dropped out of college. He's not Harvard educated. He's not Yale educated. He's not Stanford, right? Not even the college educated. Attended a terrible school of misfortune. And again, he's being attacked all the time. Right? There are conservatives, including his wife, who equate him and the suffering that he and his family have gone through to Jesus. She said that, right? And this is a big one: the human capacity for error. Right? People identify with that, right? So he didn't create all 250,000 jobs he promised. Yeah, I still created jobs. I'm only human, right? There was the recall. Human capacity for error. Really interesting. So before we get to the last slide, here is one last question. So I mentioned Scott Walker, right? So this is a short answer question. I want you to think in terms of being a progressive, but looking at conservative leaders. You're all capable of understanding the hierarchy that's going on here, right? Can you think of another conservative leader, don't say Scott Walker because I gave that one away, that embodies these ideas of being the people relate to them, they're populist, they have a human side to them, there's adversity, they face adversity. So there's one answer. I'm going to just let you do your Google search if you want. We'll take a minute to Google search. We've got some more people responding here. Be interesting to see. It doesn't have to be an American leader. It can also be it can be a foreign leader also. You can think of a foreign leader or past or present also. Sorry, it can be any conservative leader. Just take another minute. And while we're waiting, for those of you who don't know now, I'm giving a workshop on last votes to come in. Okay, so I'm giving a workshop this Sunday, the 19th, and it's from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's at the Madison Teachers Inc. office on Williamson Street in Madison, and it's being sponsored by Move to Amend, Wisconsin. And we're going to look at, this is a 3-part workshop. So we're going to start with part 1 is this Sunday, and then the next 2 parts are going to be, and the information's on my website under workshop registration. So we're going to look at reframing the money in politics issue, which is huge now with what's happening with the bill, right? So the idea that the message corporations are not people is not effective. They recognize that that's negation, that is actually, evoking the idea that corporations are people. So we're going to try and find a pioneering way to change the frame on money in politics. So the voting is done, and so we have, so John Boehner and Dick Cheney, I would agree with that. Boehner with the whole, he just sounds like a regular guy, and Cheney as well. I mean, the whole hunting thing. And Mary Jarvis also added Hitler and McCarthy. Yeah, Hitler for sure. Very populist. Chris Christie, absolutely. Wow, another person said Hitler. Wow, spot on. And then St. Ronald Reagan. So we had some Hitlers, we have a McCarthy for sure. Until people started realizing that McCarthy was just off the rails. So we've got a couple Hitlers, we've got McCarthy, we've got Boehner, Cheney, Chris Christie. So excellent, yeah, a lot of good. And so I think what we need to do is start looking to progressive leaders who embody those progressive ideas. And I'm sure we can think of a lot that are. But what's really interesting is they don't communicate those values, right? They don't communicate and present this vision of the three-legged stool, providing all the legs, and then saying, here's how we do that through policy, provide those legs to people. So in closing tonight, I want to leave you with this, because this goes to the betrayal of trust thing we talked about before, because we also need to provide accountability to the hierarchy, and the progressive frame does that because it evokes empathy. And what is empathy? Responsibility for others is self. It doesn't put you above others, right? It says that, okay, I've got it good, but I have a responsibility to other people to help provide freedom and opportunity for them, right? It is a moral responsibility for us to act on our empathy, to provide greater freedom for others, to provide opportunity for others as we would like for ourselves. It's necessary to private prosperity, right? You must have empathy, and you must have the public in order to have private prosperity. Without that, you lose a critical leg of the stool, and the whole thing falls over. Because then you have whole groups of people in communities that are left in the dust. And finally, to counter the hierarchy, and this is actually one thing that Bernie Sanders does really well, is talking about how wealthy people have a greater responsibility. They have a greater benefit that they receive from the public, all of us, and from the people in general. So they have a greater responsibility to act on their empathy to pay that forward. So that's the bottom line. And I think if we start, building those three legs to the stool and evoking these ideas on our issues, we can start doing some serious undermining, and then as more people catch on, the more power we'll have. So, any final questions for tonight? We'll open the floor up. And you all know how to reach me if you need to. So, excellent. Thank you. I hope you all enjoyed this, and thanks for the participation. I hope to see you all very soon. I will continue to let you know workshops are taking place, and let me know if you have ideas for the newsletters that are upcoming. Oh, I see some people are typing. Oh, you're very welcome. So yeah. So thank you all very much. I'm going to stop the recording, and have a great weekend.